We're going to get started now. Welcome. I think if anyone's online, if we could just make sure everyone's muted, and I think we are, so that's great. Welcome, everybody. My name is Jean Delios. I'm the Assistant Town Manager, and I'm very pleased to have you all tonight. Thank you for coming. We are here tonight to talk about the future and to talk about a vision for the future. And the project that we're talking about is the Reading Center for Active Living. We call it Recalc. And this is a public forum where we're really here to listen to what our residents have to say about planning for the future. And when we talk about the future, we're really talking about what is our vision. And by vision, we mean the ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. And I took that from the Oxford Dictionary. In other words, we're asking you to think big. Think really big, because it's really limitless when you start imagining what can be. So on your chairs tonight, you see some cards, and the team here will explain a little bit about what that is, but those are for ideas. And for anybody who doesn't feel comfortable raising their hand, that's why you have a card on your seat, so you can share the ideas. And welcome to the Zoom crowd as well. We're very interested in hearing from you, and we will do our best to juggle back and forth. So thank you all for coming. I'm very excited to introduce our team, and I'm going to do that in a minute, but I want to say a special thank you to my colleague, Kevin Bowmiller, who is the Community Services Director, and some of you may know him from his role as the Veteran Services Officer, but he's involved in the Pleasant Street Center, in recreation, and so much more. So happy to be here with Kevin. And I want to say a thank you to my colleague here at the library. So thank you to the library folks, Amy Lannon and her team, for allowing us to have the meeting here tonight. This is a beautiful space, and we're thrilled to be able to be here. Okay, I also want to recognize any select board members or other elected officials. Thank you, Mark. But if I've missed anyone online or on the Zoom, thank you for coming and welcome. I think the town manager is also joining us, so thank you to Fidel. And I'll stop there and then talk about kind of where we've been. So we've been looking at how we can do better with providing a senior facility, a community center. And we've had UMass here before, and they'll go through sort of the timeline of the work they did the last time, but they did a needs assessment several years ago. And the needs assessment really pointed to and highlighted how the Pleasant Street Center has really served us well, but we can do better. And that's what we're here to talk about. So when we talk about doing better, we really talk about this population of residents age 60 plus, and it's growing. And it's really important that the services provided continually evolve to deliver in a facility that is safe, accessible, and meets the needs of our community. The Pleasant Street Center is a wonderful building and has served us really, really well, but it's time to think about next steps. So I'm going to let the Gerontology Institute talk a little bit about their work in the past and their role going forward. But I just want to spend a quick minute and mention that the select board appointed a committee, an ad hoc committee that we call Recalc, and that's the committee that so many are here tonight, and I want to recognize those people. The chair is John O'Neill, and of course, Mark Doxer is the select board liaison. We've been working very closely. On the Zoom is Ron Massini and Nora Bucko, and I'm sure I missed somebody. Sorry if I, did you want to call yourselves to order? Yes.
active living, and I have to do a roll call, which I'll do now, because there's 7 members and 4 are present, at least 4 are present. We'll find out if others are present as well. Mark Doxer,
Yes.
John Parsons, Nora Bucko,
Yes.
Ron Assini,
Yes.
John Sasso,
Yes.
Michael Colton, and John O'Neill present. Quorum.
Great, thank you. So our committee is an ad hoc committee, and they got appointed by the select board last fall, and we've been meeting. Kevin and I have been staffing the committee and meeting ever since, a couple times a month. And we were lucky enough to have a little bit of money so that we could hire UMass, the Institute of Gerontology, as our consultants who are guiding us and assisting us as we go forward. The Recalc focus is really twofold in terms of collecting data. One is benchmarking communities in the neighboring communities with both senior and multi-generational centers. And Recalc has got about 21 communities that they're going out to. And we formed a uniform survey document that we're actually doing site visits. Everyone's taken a few, and we're going out and collecting all this data about what's happening in the other communities, which has been a lot of fun. And then the second thing is, obviously why we're here tonight, to gather community input and feedback to help us create this vision for the future. So this is really meant to be a listening session. Once Recalc recommends this vision with your help, the next steps will be to seek funding for a feasibility study. And the feasibility study is really where we get into the nuts and bolts of how big is the facility? Where is the facility going to be? What kinds of things should we be thinking about in terms of space? And so all of that happens at that later phase. We're at pre-feasibility phase now. And so that will happen subsequent to the work we're doing here. And we're very excited now to introduce Dr. Caitlin Coyle. Dr. Coyle earned her doctorate in gerontology from UMass, and she has extensive experience working as a research partner to community-based organizations. Her work informs planning, development, and improvement to the services and supports being provided to older adults and people with disabilities. And with Dr. Coyle is Sierra Somerville, who is a PhD candidate in gerontology at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Her research interests include aging services and bridging the gaps between research, policy, and practice. Her dissertation will focus on senior centers, yay, in Massachusetts, how lucky are we to have her, how they are structured and function, how they differ by type of community, and how they innovate to meet the needs of older adults. She aims to continue conducting applied research on aging service organizations upon completing her PhD. So thank you again for joining us, and I want to welcome our town manager, Fidel Maltez. Welcome, Fidel. And he's been a big supporter of our work so far, so we really appreciate it. So with that, I would say please join me in welcoming Dr. Coyle.
Thank you. Thank you, Jean. I'm going to use this wireless mic. I think it'll be better for everybody. It's great to be here this evening. This is part 2 of our series today here in Reading. We were at the Pleasant Street Center this afternoon. We had a standing room only crowd there. Great conversation, and this is another opportunity for us to hear from you all here, both in the physical room and also on the Zoom room. So thrilled to be here to have this additional conversation. I'm going to do give a little bit more context about sort of who we are and complement some of the things that Jean mentioned. I forgot my tool here, my clicker. So just a little bit more about sort of who we are and how we got ourselves into these kinds of projects. So we are housed at the Gerontology Center at UMass Boston. The Gerontology Institute specifically is the 2nd oldest academic program in gerontology in the United States. And 1 in 4 PhDs in gerontology received that at UMass Boston. So UMass really is sort of one of the founding fathers of gerontology and one of the leading programs in the field. So it's a gift for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I think, because part of our mission is service to the Commonwealth. And so we leverage our expertise in research and aging and try to provide sort of applied research that contributes to communities. Within the Institute, I run a small research center called the Center for Social and Demographic Research on Aging. We do a number of different things, but one line of work has been contracting directly with cities and towns in Massachusetts to help them plan for the aging of the population, of their population. So we collect data in all kinds of forms. We analyze those data and prepare reports that have recommendations to communities about how they can create safe, welcoming, and supportive places for people to age. We've been around since 2012. Since then, we've worked with 70 cities and towns in Massachusetts on this topic. So this is really at the heart of our mission and the work that we do at UMass, and we're grateful to be here in Reading. Just again, a little bit of recap in terms of where you guys have been and what has brought us to this point. Legend has it that in 1991, the Pleasant Street Center opened as the senior center here in Reading. And then in 2015, the senior center actually changed its name to the Pleasant Street Center. And part of that was to sort of widen its reach to entice people to come and participate at the Pleasant Street Center. And then in 2017, the town actually hired our team to come in and do a needs assessment specifically related to the Pleasant Street Center and understanding, is it meeting the needs of the community? So that's a project that Jean referenced earlier. I was actually looking in my files, and we were here in Reading in 2017, 5 years ago to this week, actually, doing that work. So it's a little bit full circle that we're back here today to continue that conversation. As Jean mentioned, one of the main findings of that report is that the Pleasant Street Center is not adequately meeting the needs of the current seniors and certainly will not be able to continue to meet the needs of the growing population of older adults in Reading. As a result of that work, as Jean said, in 2021, the Recalc Committee was appointed and really charged with moving this forward in terms of creating some plans and getting some momentum going around moving towards the goal of our Center for Active Living. That brings us to 2022, when Recalc hired us to come in and do this community engagement work to really try to hear from the community, not just about what are the needs of the community, but really what do you envision as a Center for Active Living? What would bring you into a Center for Active Living? What do you envision seeing there? And talking a little bit about sort of the vision of what a Center for Active Living would look like. So that's part of our conversation this evening is going to be about that. This is just a little bit more about the Recalc Committee to make sure you understand their mission, which is really to explore the current and future needs of the community and initiate planning for a potential new senior/community center in town that will focus on residents 60 plus and possibly residents of other ages. So that's really what Recalc is working to do. And I also wanted to just give you a little bit of data around the age distribution of your community. This is based on American Community Survey data estimates, the 2020 estimates, which actually came out in mid-March. And this shows, overall it showed a pretty stable population size here in Reading. So there hasn't been a lot of change in terms of the size of the population, but you do see you've got 26% of your community is age 60 or older, which by Older Americans Act standards means they're seniors by definition. So that's compared to 25%, which is under age 18, and then your sort of 35% 18 to 49 and 15% 50 in their 50 to 59-year-old age group. So a significant portion of your community is older adult, more than a quarter of the community is considered older adults, and we expect that to continue as we move forward. So talking a little bit, what are we trying to do here this evening? What's our conversation going to be like? This is really your opportunity as residents of the town of Reading to have the town hear from you about Reading as a place to live. Specifically, we're going to start with a little warm-up exercise, talking about what are the good things about living in Reading, what are the challenges about living in Reading, sort of what do we already have in place that we can think that are our strengths. And then we're going to get into the fun part, which is really hearing some ideas and thoughts and opinions about the vision of a Center for Active Living. What would that look like? Where would it be? Who would go there? What kinds of things would happen at a Center for Active Living? We want to hear what your thinking is about this topic. So what I have, as I mentioned, I have a series of questions. We're going to kind of walk through them. I'm going to hear from folks in the room. I invite you to raise your hand And Sierra or myself will come to you with the microphone, and we ask you to use the microphone so the folks in the Zoom room can hear us. And we'll have the conversation. For each question, we'll hear from the folks in the room, and then we'll make sure that anybody on the Zoom room, if they have any contributions, we'll pause and ask them to do that, and then we'll move on to the next question. As Jean also mentioned, your note cards are there. If you're hearing things and you have ideas or you have thoughts or comments, please feel free to either save them and raise your hand, or you can write them on the note card. Leave those note cards on your chair as you leave, and we'll be sure to collect them after everyone is gone. Before we get into the sort of public forum part of it, does anybody have any questions about anything that I've said already this evening?
I just wanted to see if there was a quorum. I forgot to mention the Council on Aging.
Is there a quorum for the Council on Aging?
I think there is.
We have 4 here. Are there any that's anyone online?
I did not see
No.
one.
Okay, and I don't think we have a quorum.
I also wanted to say welcome to the Council on Aging members, so thank you,
Yes, if you're
Marilyn.
on the Council on Aging, raise your hand.
Yes, Marilyn, Barbara,
Thank you for being here.
Julie.
Sandy, and
Joanne.
Jim.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Good, great,
Thanks.
thanks, Jean. So yes, so use your note cards, but also be thinking about your ideas and your questions as we go forward. So as I mentioned, we're going to start with some warm-up questions. The first one hopefully will be easy. It's sort of, what are the things that you value about living in Reading? What makes Reading a good place to live? Feel free to just raise your hand. Yes. Welcome.
I think one thing I appreciate is the increasingly lovely and walkable downtown with an emphasis more on small businesses, local small businesses. I really like that. And it's gotten quite pretty, I think, you know. I can't say as I felt that way when I moved here a long time ago, to be honest.
Okay. I'll just repeat that for anybody who didn't hear. So the comment was the walkable downtown and the emphasis on small business, and also sort of the aesthetic of the downtown. Sort of it's nice, a nice downtown walkable focus on small business. I think that's great. Any other things people like about living in Reading?
Well, during COVID, they had RCTV, and we had exercise programs on there every day that we could exercise where we live when we couldn't get out. So that was nice that they had programs and other things, health things. And
Yeah, so having something like RCTV to be able to sort of make that transition, so people still were able to do their exercise classes and attend programming even remotely during COVID. But I also, I think RCTV is certainly a resource for the whole community.
it was.
Yeah, thank you.
We have some public transportation, the train and the connection to Boston is important to me. We need more public transportation, we at least have some, and that makes us eligible for the ride. Also, I think we have a good police department, a fire department, safe, it's safe, it feels safe to live here.
Yeah, can I ask you just to say a little more about the transportation piece? So you have some transportation and you're saying there's a need for more, what kind of?
Well, the public transportation, we have a bus that leaves from the depot, but it's very limited where it goes. It goes to Wakefield, it goes down one street. That's an affordable kind of transportation for older people. We really need more of that. And we have the train is expensive.
Right.
We also have the alternate, if you want to take the bus and not pay the $5 for the train, you could take the bus, and I think the bus is $1.50 or something like that. We do need more of that. I've been to other senior centers and they've reached out, they have like a contract with a cab company. We don't have a cab company in Reading. I don't, a lot of people, I don't know if they do Uber, people who are not computer literate don't really get into the Uber thing, the Lyft thing. So we really do need more inexpensive public transportation, particularly for the older people and for the, people in lower income.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I think there is a
Can I ask you to put it up a little so everybody can hear what I'm
loud voice.
Okay, well then you could just
Anyway.
project. That works too.
I think we have a pretty good setup for transportation for seniors. We have 2 vans and they go to all the shopping centers or a lot of the shopping centers at one time or another over a 2-week period. In addition, we have the medical transportation that's through the Reading Response Hospital Trust, but it's paid for, it's free. And you can go to Boston if you need to. Any place the van can't take you for a medical appointment. The alternate transportation through Reading Response will take you. And they have a new vendor now, and I hear from the people that I live near that have used it, that they like it very much. I think, you know, not being able to drive anywhere is a painful thing, but I think it's a little less painful in Reading because the transportation setup at the senior center is good.
Yeah.
I don't know about public transportation,
Yeah.
I don't use it.
I
Sure.
agree with that.
No, I think that's a great, yeah, and you agree, yep. So the senior center transportation, yeah, go ahead, back there and then.
I actually think we're incredibly fortunate that we have what I would consider two excellent community centers already, the YMCA and the library where we're meeting today. I think we're incredibly fortunate to have those two facilities. Other communities, literally, I think are quite envious that not only do we have a Y, but we have this new library.
I want to elaborate a little bit more on what she said as far as the ride I thought she was referring to. How come they don't have an office nearby? You have to go to Chelsea. And people that don't drive, how do they get to Chelsea to begin with? Oh, what bus line do you take? I don't know what bus line goes to Chelsea from here. We don't have one. I think also Peg was referring to public transportation.
Yes.
That should be added on because we don't have very much public transportation. What we have, believe me, is thankful to have it,
Sure.
but not enough.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Other, oh.
I really love the people in Reading and the opportunities for us to get together. And I know there are a lot of opportunities for young people to get together and young families to get together. I've also loved having the opportunity to get together with multi-generations at things offered by the school, like the theater programs and the choral performances, those kinds of things. And volunteering at those, I've met so many different people. I've loved those opportunities to volunteer in Reading and be a part of what happens, and that I'm welcomed that way. And just a shout out also to RCTV on that case. A lot of the programs we've done have been broadcast by RCTV for those people that can't necessarily attend, so that they can participate and enjoy those programs from afar as well. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Other good things? I know there's more, but we don't have to cover them all. Yes.
I like the location of Reading. It's just very easy to get to other places if you can drive. But that's the issue for seniors, is driving. So I agree with the transportation issue. There's really no public transportation. I moved here from Arlington where buses came into all the neighborhoods. I didn't even see a bus for the first few years I lived here. And then I realized there was one that went to the depot, but I only had a couple times a day.
Yeah.
And I didn't know where it went.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure, but
Yeah, certainly. I think that's a little segue, you know, maybe moving on to sort of what are some of the challenges about living in Reading. And we've certainly heard about the transportation challenge, and I'm curious if we want to move to that part of the warm-up exercise and talk a little bit more about what are some of the other challenges that face people living in Reading. Yes.
We're talking about keeping our seniors, we have to actually allow them to be able to afford to live here.
Yeah.
And the tax break that town meeting passed is really affecting just an incredibly small amount of individuals. We can't really give away, you know, that was $1 million that the town lost. We can't do that. We can't subsidize our seniors. So we have to make Reading manageable to keep them. It's always better to keep seniors in a community. It's better for the community overall. So that's the obvious. It's tax base.
Yeah, I'm curious if you have any ideas about what some of those solutions might be beyond sort of the existing tax relief.
I think that's a much bigger issue.
It is.
than we probably do.
Yeah, sure, yeah, I just thought I'd ask. But yes, I mean, affordability is certainly a huge one in terms of people's ability to remain living in Reading, and certainly relevant to this conversation. Other challenges?
I live in the northern part of town,
Okay.
and while we might have a nice downtown, I avoid it. When I go to Market Basket, I am forced to take an exit that goes through the parking lot and out the back to Main Street. My street intersects with Main Street, or Route 28. It's a mile and a half, and I encounter 8 traffic lights. Driving through Reading is a daily stressor for me.
Yes, so driving the congestion, the traffic, a real deterrent for people to really access the community. What's Spencer?
I guess I just want to say that we don't all go to bed at 4 o'clock when we become seniors either. And, you know, we're sort of treated like that. We don't sleep all weekend either, you know. And so when you're looking, and we need challenging things. I appreciate bingo, but I would look into more than bingo. I need some challenge. And I've been to other senior centers where they do provide a challenge. And they are attempting to provide things in the early evenings, especially when it's light out longer.
Right.
So, you know, I think that the center that closes at 4, it's early.
Yeah.
And we're not all, some of us, it's great for homebound people, but if you're still an active person looking for involvement in some kind of intellectual challenges, we need more. We can't just have bingo. I mean, bingo is great. I like bingo too, but I want some other things too.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I think evening, weekends, having places to go and socialize and participate, as well as sort of those intellectually challenging programs. Thank you.
I'm very interested in that, and us, the older folks not being siloed off from the younger folks. I think in terms of stimulation, you know, they're at school, but then, you know, especially middle schoolers, I think they benefit from us. And we could teach them chess and bridge, and they'd like that. I'm sure they'd like that.
They're kind of like bingo too.
Yeah. And I think they'd like, I think they'd like to get to know us as human beings, not just extendable old users. And because especially in the last 2 years, you know, the kids are too much, they're not socialized very well. And especially like the middle schoolers, it would be lovely for them to have a safe place that was, you know, that was had supervised activities and space for them to do stuff they like to do, or, you know, and just things or whatever.
Yeah, but,
You know,
right, and activities and programs that maybe aren't happening here at the library, but could be happening elsewhere.
Yes, and you know, especially after school, but including us, because I think we have something to offer them.
Yes, thank you. So the value of having the opportunity to interact intergenerationally, I think, is important. The after-school piece, I think that's great. And actually, I was going to just move us right on to talking about some of the visions. Does anyone have any other challenges before we move along to the fun part of the evening? All right. So in terms of thinking about how do we envision what a Center for Active Living looks like, wanting to get your thoughts and your opinions about some of the aspects of a center. We don't know the details, right? We don't know the square footage. We don't know where it's going to be located. We don't know how much it's going to cost. Those things are unknowns to us at this moment. So when we're thinking about envisioning a Reading Center for Active Living, for the purposes of today's conversation, I want us to think big. I want us to think creatively, think about what would get you to show up to the Reading Center for Active Living, what would keep you coming, think about your friends and neighbors and what would get them to come. So we're not really focused on sort of the how we're gonna do this yet. Today, we're really just trying to get some information from you all, your thoughts, your opinions about what would get you there, what would keep you coming, what would get your friends and neighbors to come, okay? So I want us to not worry so much. I know it's hard to not have that, to have this conversation without all of those knowns. But I think for today, we're really focused on these ideas. And so one of the first questions we were talking about, sort of the intergenerational piece, who would come to a Reading Center for Active Living? Who in town who would come there? What's your vision for that?
Thank you. I love the idea of bringing the generations together and having an opportunity for our older citizens to be with our youngest citizens as well as our middle schoolers, whether it's through programming, story times. I want to know people's histories and stories of who they are and where they came from in our town and share together our stories both here in Reading and our families.
Yeah, so you're talking about everybody coming to the Center for Active Living.
I am, and I also remember when my dad was immobilized due to an injury, the bright spot of his day was watching a playground with the children playing. And so to have that going on and parents and easy interactions that just happen naturally, I really like that idea, and I love the idea of volunteering opportunities for seniors with younger kids and families.
Yes.
And foster grandparent programs and go on, I won't.
No, that's great, that's great. So we have visions of people of all generations attending the Center for Active Living.
I think downtown is a wonderful place. It's the center of town and easier to get there. And I walk around downtown now that I live near the downtown and I've moved close. And I keep going by that Walgreens, which is now in the market and they pay taxes. It's a dog in the manger situation, as Jean knows. Very much dog in a manger. But I know of other places where they've had someone get, who does grants, go to Walgreens, they have a foundation and say, how would you like to get this, give this for price, a price we can afford. It's a lot of space and it's downtown and just say, you get some kind of charitable tax write-off and, we could spend our money on fixing over the inside if it has enough space because, and we know they just don't want CVS to move over. Say that, but, that would, then they there would never be a CVS there, that might get it. Yes.
I thought of that too, but I thought of it as an annex, that we could keep both buildings, have a smaller building for activities that are suitable to that. One of the things we don't have in the smaller building is a lot of handicapped access. It's cold in there, and if you sit and have lunch, if the door opens, it's cold in there in the winter. But it's a beautiful building, and it could have its particular uses. It's got a lot of smaller rooms, but I would picture that as an annex. And I like the whole idea of being downtown. I think you want to be accessible to everybody. The other place I've thought of is the where Market Basket is that whole, there's lots of empty stuff there. I don't know how it's flat, it's not, but there are things I think in town we can look at, and I think the center of town is an important place for a center to be located.
Right. Because if you go too far up, people that don't drive can't get there.
Right.
You have to always.
Must be fix our transportation problem.
Right, that's it, that's always.
So there's sort of the value of being downtown because it's theoretically accessible to lots of people in the community. And we're talking, one idea is possibly the empty Walgreens creating some kind of annex or additional space to the existing center. We're gonna move on to another part of the conversation, but before we do that, I wanted to just sort of take a sense from the room. We're talking, I heard most of what I've heard is about support for sort of this multi-generational center, a place where both seniors and people of other ages can come and participate in various programs. And I want to make sure that I'm reading the room properly, and that's sort of how we're feeling.
I'm not opposed to a multi-generational center, and the town of Reading does an awful lot for kids, I mean, as they should.
Yep.
I mean, they're our future, we absolutely positively need to have resources for kids, but if you look at library programs, they're mostly for kids. You know, and so I support a multi-generational center as long as we don't forget that we need as many programs, if not more, for the seniors. And just one more comment about having things downtown. As I said, it's 1.5 miles for me to get, you know, from that center space downtown to my street. So, you know, I can still walk 1.5 miles, but I'm not sure that I would.
Right.
You know, and while Reading is geographically very small, there are people who are 2-3 miles from downtown, I would think.
Yeah. I think that's a good point. So yes, support for the multi-generational center, but important to not forget about the seniors and to ensure that they have, you know, as many programs and opportunities to participate as any other group. Oh, back there and then.
Hi, I'm going to be the fly in the ointment because I'm not actually in support of this, and I'm basing it on the town manager and Jane Burns back in 2019 invited a state expert to come to the select board meeting. And Emmett, I'm going to think
Schmar's out.
Yes. Yeah. The two takeaways I had from his presentation was do anything with exercise and seniors will come.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing he was adamant about is that multi-generational centers do not work and that seniors will not come. And that was a takeaway. So I'm very mixed about what this is proposing because he's someone who our town invited. And I get a sense that somehow other people didn't like what an expert said. The other question I have is, does it have to be committed to one place? I mean, I've heard a lot about transportation. Was there any thought to really having a network of places? I mean, we have some of that now, but on a very small scale, and it's not organized. So you have a knitting group that drops in at White Lamb and at RCTV, you know, you have a number of things. Are we doing enough to partner with a lot of other, you know, smaller pockets?
Yeah.
You know, someone said earlier they'd like to do things more in the evening. Well, that might not be as large a group, or it could be, I don't know. And are we committed to one building as opposed to using the buildings we already have? The schools, like cafeteria, you know, and the schools in the evening. You know, I'm just saying, I think we need to be a little more creative than thinking of just a box and then we put everything in it. That's all.
Yeah, well, certainly there's nothing that's been committed to at this moment, and I think that the idea of sort of satellite locations around the community is certainly something to consider. I also think that in terms of the multi-generational piece, you know, we're sort of throwing that term around without really knowing exactly what that would look like. There's versions of it, right? So there's a version that is, you know, programming for people of all ages to come together and do things all together. There's also versions where there's programming specifically for the 60 plus or the 50 plus and programming for younger folks and different parts of an existing, you know, so I think saying multi-generational doesn't mean that everybody's going to be in a program with the little kids is not the version I don't think we're talking about, but I think it's important to acknowledge that. So I appreciate those comments. We got somebody back here, and then how about you go on?
Yeah, there's a growing population of people over 85. We can't forget about that end of the spectrum either. And right now, there's a shortage of spaces for people in the adult daycare. And, you know, it's gotta be a big problem for people a short way down the road. And I think that needs to be taken into consideration. I don't think it's something necessarily that Reading Elder Services should run, but space for a vendor to run a program out of the senior center. I think the senior centers have to get involved at the point or shortly.
Yeah, I think that's important. So this idea of, you know, caregiver respite, adult day, a place for folks who are aging at home for them to go when they need a little extra support. So having some space physical space for those folks to come and socialize and be part of the community.
I've been involved for several years with a non-for-profit that has a variety of different age groups that attend this non-for-profit, from seniors to newborns to teens. We endeavored to try to get the younger generations involved with the senior generations. We did things, for one of many examples, during Thanksgiving, we would have meals, we would prepare meals for the seniors, and we would force is the right word. We force the teenagers to come and help us prepare the meals. So I think, and I say that because I think the idea of having these multi-generational groups together, it sounds really awesome. As an old person at 57, I can say that, but one thing I've learned from trying to make that happen, believe it or not, teenagers do not want to hang around. I can say this because I'm old. They don't want to hang around with old people. They just don't.
Yeah, no, I think that's a reality that I think we have to.
The second thing I want to bring is, I too oppose this, and it's probably not a popular thing to say, but the money has to come from somewhere, and this town is like a drunken sailor with spending money. We've built new police departments, a new library, new schools, new this, new that, no offense, but new positions for social justice coordinator, new positions for Recalc. I could go on and on and on. Somebody's going to pay for this, and this is going to be very, very expensive. We had a Prop 2.5 override, and I just don't want to keep paying, especially when there are other choices. There are other buildings we can do things in. We have a library. We have the YMCA. We have open spaces in many different buildings. So there's probably a gang of seniors waiting in the back parking lot to beat me up now, so all it is.
No, but I appreciate those comments. I think that, the reality of mixed, generations, yes, I think a program here and there where they can work together is great. I think thinking that they would be able to have the same programs or do the same things is not necessarily realistic. And I think your point about cost is also really important to consider.
Two things that are very important to me are location. You had asked what would get us there, and that's the number one thing for me, is accessibility and location. I mean, I can drive and I will drive for a while, I'm sure, but it has to be close enough to get there. And so the center of town, like many people mentioned, is important. The location of the Pleasant Street Center is ideal, but the building itself is not. And along with multi-generational, multifunctional is most important to me. We do not have the abilities to, so many people have mentioned the Y. The Y is not accessible for a lot of seniors. It's expensive, especially if you're single. I mean, joining as a family is one thing, but joining as an individual, which a lot of seniors are, widowed and whatever, it's not affordable. We really need a gym in a senior center. My physical therapist has asked me, don't we have an exercise room somewhere in a senior center? We don't.
Right. Yeah.
We don't have a bike. We don't have really anything. And we need that.
Yeah, I think both really important points, the multifunctionality of the space and the location in terms of its accessibility, and then the focus on sort of the physical activity space to do some exercise and physical activity, which leads me to the next question, which is sort of, we're kind of moving in that direction anyway. What would bring you to an Center for Active Living? What would people do there? So we've talked about exercise, we've talked about intergenerational programming, we've talked about volunteering. What are some of the other things people would like to see? Oh, I'm sorry.
Not about that. I just have a quick question. What is driving this discussion? So was it an overpopulation of too many people wanting to go to the senior center, that you couldn't fit everybody in? Have people articulated a need for multi-generational, a larger social space? I'm listening to some of the comments and I'm wondering, I wasn't here, I mean, I lived here, but I wasn't at any of the meetings. Like for when the library was proposed, like all the multi-generation, everybody getting involved, everybody coming here. I can assume that a lot of those same conversations occurred, in building this building. And so what you just mentioned with regards to the activity room or the exercise bikes and whatever, that's different than building a new space or finding a new space. It's about allocating resources to create that kind of space within the space that you have. So I think I have more questions than anything, but I'm just wondering about what is the basis of this, what prompted the town to hire UMass and.
Sure. So in 2017, we came into the town of Reading and we did a needs assessment focused on the Pleasant Street Center. So we heard from the community about sort of what their needs and preferences were and how that relates to the capacity of the Pleasant Street Center. And what we found is that the Pleasant Street Center cannot meet the needs of the current senior population, and it certainly will not meet the needs of the growing future senior population. So it was determined that something needs to be done about the existing space. And so that's the premise of our conversation this evening.
So is it they can't meet the needs based on the demographics that you anticipate will be here, which for me personally, I think, I don't even know if I can stay here after a certain point. Because once I stop working, it will become difficult. So that's just the reality of life. And so you're looking at demographics, and ultimately at the end of the day, we all have individual preferences as to how we want to spend our time. So I guess that goes back to my original question is, how is the senior, how since in 31 years the senior center's been open, have people kept information and usage? I know it's changed over time, and for the last few years, everyone's probably been, allocating booster shots and vaccines and organizing that. So prior to that, and even since, maybe we're on the downside, hopefully, that what have they been doing? What are the same people going? Have you been able to either, I'm not gonna reveal my age, but I'm older than him. But I'm not going to a senior center. Now, part of it's my personality. I don't have any interest in it. I don't have the need to right now. It's still work. But everybody has to remember, none of us outgrow our personalities from life.
Right.
So you're gonna have a social group, you're gonna have people that wanna be involved. And is this proposal, is this initiative or idea based on demographics? Is it based on needs? And can those needs of maybe a smaller percentage of the demographics, those demographics, can someone identify over a 31-year period? What percent historically have utilized the senior center?
Yeah, well, I think all valid points. I think part of the issue with the Pleasant Street Center is that it can't physically house more people than what it's currently, so in terms of people, like more people, so I don't know about the same people participating, but the same number of people are participating, and largely that's a function of capacity. There isn't space for more people to participate there. And I think there's some pretty significant accessibility issues with the building. There isn't a restroom on the first floor, there's limited parking, there's mold in the basement, flooding. So I think that to me, it seems like I think that the town has done a pretty good job at hearing from the community about what they want and what they need, and the agreement has sort of been that the Pleasant Street Center is no longer working for us. So this conversation is really about what could work for us. What would that look like?
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
So with regards to multigenerational, I agree with that, that it's difficult. And I'm just wondering, like with regards to, I think over time, people build a vision and people learn things just by life's experience. So if you have grandparents, go to Grandparents' Day at the elementary school, you see them that once. You go to church, you see older people there. Intergenerational means the kids have to see elders living a life. They have to see them beyond passing them in a CVS or seeing someone's grandmother. And maybe the usage, somebody mentioned, I'm sorry, I don't remember, the usage of the elementary schools as an activity center, on some day where you're crossing paths, people are passing a room full of women, men, at certain points in the day, even if it's once a week that you have them there. And then over the course of a school year, 5 or 6 years if you're in an elementary school, you see those people and you see them differently. Because despite the fact that I want them to senior center, I'm at an age where people don't even look at you. I always say, like the whole Me Too movement, I said, I don't have to start one that says, #I see you. Because people don't even acknowledge elderly. So I do think all of that, although desirable, is not going to be achieved on an ad hoc basis. And no middle schooler is going to want to hang around anyone over 30 probably. So anyway,
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those thoughts. So we wanted to continue the conversation about sort of what would get you to come to the center and what would you see there?
One of the things, just to kind of continue what you were just saying, I'm aware of programs that have been, is this on?
Yes.
Okay, so I can't hear myself. But I'm aware of programs where they've had, like in an elementary school, they would have one day, or in some communities, they would have every day, 5 days a week. They would have a long table that the elders would sit at, and then the kids were there, especially elementary, this worked well. I mean, sometimes, obviously they would get noisy, and then come in. But people loved it. I mean, the people who are older adults really loved going there. And it was the person who ran the cafeteria was wonderful. So it wasn't like, bringing in the plates from outside and then heating them up. And the food was excellent. Some of the regional schools, I know at the Whittier or Tape, they have the Poets Inn, which is a wonderful low-cost restaurant. There are a lot of ways that you can, have you thought about regionalizing these senior centers? Because I know people go to Winfield, or people go to various ones, or Andover or something, and different ones have different specialties in a way. And why do we have to have all the specialties in our particular facility? We're not in a competition really. We're trying to provide services. So I'm just trying to figure out, what would be a way when I picture community involvement. And I understand I've had grandchildren that are in high school and whatever. And I understand that children don't necessarily, they're not used to being around elders and various kinds of elders. And I think it's really important for them to, even in little bits, little exposures. Our musicians, there are people who loved it, and children love them. My mother was a cellist. They loved to demonstrate at the elementary schools. And there's so many talents out there, people who are over 60, which is where it is. At least they say. But people should be involved in, the schools should be very much involved. We have a lot of empty space in schools. And we also, though, have to keep in mind, we have a Tillum school that, the 30 plus years I've lived here, they renovated, it was new in the 70s and 80s. But we still do need to deal with that. And we can renovate it with, part of passing the money for these schools is to say, you know what, we could have some senior programs in the cafeteria. We could consider the handicapped access. And there are several things. When you talk about that bathroom in the senior center that isn't there, I was involved in trying to get a bathroom there. And the executive who was involved in the senior center at the time got a van to go into the plumbing board to get a variance so that they wouldn't have to have a bathroom on the main floor. This was on Boston radio, Marjorie Clapper. People couldn't believe that that's what happened then. I don't want to see more mistakes where they say this is accessible. The high school, when they downsized, they also built a cafeteria that was smaller. But what they did was they actually created one that didn't have enough space around, the architect did this, didn't have enough space around the circle tables so that you could not fit that many people. You had to have a certain amount of space around the tables. You really have to watch these projects when you do them too. And I think we've seen it. I don't think people begrudge money, but we really want to see what we have used well. And we want to see the byproduct, and we want to understand.
Yeah, no, I think your point, especially around the multi-generational thing, there's certainly a number of ways that you can infuse multi-generational, intergenerational experiences into your community all over the place, in the businesses, in the schools, in the churches. I think what we're talking about is, in addition to that, we also need a place where the senior elder services, the human services, the programs that are offered through the existing town departments have a place that they can offer their programs that is accessible and accommodating to the community. So I sort of think, a multi-generational center is not gonna solve ageism in our community, right? I think there's a number of efforts that need to take place outside of the Pleasant Street Center or any other center, frankly, to expose young people to older generations. That's a different conversation. I think what we're talking about here tonight is sort of about, in addition to that, how can we make sure that the residents who are here and aging here have access to the services and supports that are being offered.
I think one of the interesting things, and one of the things that we really should be thinking about, is offering some meals again. We had offered meals in the past and they weren't very well attended for a while. But we have having an adequate kitchen and having people serve meals that are nutritious and so forth, I think is an important thing. And when you're older, I think a lot of older people, cooking for themselves is a challenge for one person. And having meals at least once a day or 5 days a week or something like that. There are certain people that will come every day to do that. And I think that's an important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So meals, being able to provide nutritious and affordable meals to folks. Thank you.
I want to answer the woman there in reference, who will go, you will go to the senior center, but I have been going for years. Not because I'm old or young or whatever, I went when I was way, way younger than what I am today. But there are people there that will go and need to go there because they have no place else to go. That's their outlet for the day, and especially meals that were served. I don't want to say anything, but other senior centers have chefs in the premise, on the premises, and everybody will go and have lunch there. I have gone to Linfield, and so hasn't been, many of my friends have gone to Linfield for many, many classes, which Reading does not have. So if it was in Reading, certainly I would stay local, but I will go to Linfield because it's being offered there. That's one of the reasons why there's a senior center. And, you know, as far as.
We don't need one. That's not what that might be implication.
No, it was, who will go to the senior center?
Some people will.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was the question, who would go to the senior center in general, not just to you or to me. I go to classes at the senior center. I used to go to computer at the senior center there downstairs. I haven't been able because it's been closed, and I miss that because I can't get there. They say there's whatever the reason is, and I wish they would really open the room soon, because a lot of people, that we used to have a gentleman that would teach the class free. And there were people going there to learn, because not everybody is literate, computer literate like everybody else. I need that room to be open, but it's not. And I miss that very much. That's one of the things that I miss, aside other classes that we have there, that we have been going, and people complain. People don't show up because it's, you know, it's not enticing. So, yeah, that's.
Yeah, so in terms of getting people in the door, one of the things that you've identified is that it has to be enticing. It has to be a place that people want to be and spend time. So I think that's important. Got somebody over here. I haven't checked. Is there anybody on Zoom that needs?
In my dealing with the senior center, one of the things that, and when I think about multi-generational, one of the things that strikes me is not kids, teenagers, but just younger adults who aren't seniors yet. They're going to be seniors, and those are people that I like to deal with and shouldn't like to deal with me. And I'm not necessarily yet at a stage where I need a lot of the most particular services of a senior center. And I think it's a transition that if you can get this multi-adult generations.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, multi-generational doesn't have to mean kids and older adults. It can mean people in their 40s and 50s and people in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. Those are all multiple generations. And I think the programming and that kind of thing. And I also want to just highlight, there's been a number of comments about not needing the senior center. And one of the things I think we're talking about is a center where you don't have to have a need to come. It's really an asset, a resource to you to come and take classes, to enjoy, to be with your peers and your neighbors. So I guess I just wanted to recognize that too, that what we're talking about is not a place where people have to go when they need something necessarily, but it's a place people go because it's an asset in their community where they want to contribute or engage intellectually or physically.
That gentleman brought something up, a few years ago, many of the towns had robust adult education classes. They seem to have fallen by the wayside, but that sort of thing would be very appealing to me.
Yeah. Yeah, adult education, lifelong learning, those kinds of things, absolutely. Other things that would get people in the door at a center for active living. Food, enticing environment, lifelong learning.
One of the things that all the centers have offered are movies, which is great, except that you need a committee to review the movies. You go sometimes and it's something, it's violent, it's raw, it's not appropriate for family. And it's a surprise to the people who look at the movie and they go, oh, we didn't know. But also a kind of fitting place. I travel around to the various centers, and in Winchester, they have a wonderful room. It's their auditorium, but they have the proper shades to pull down. They have somebody who stays there with the movie in case something goes wrong. The movies are streamed. They serve popcorn or something. It's inexpensive, but it draws a lot of people. It gives them a place to go. In Reading, we tried, but we have these beautiful windows, but you can't put shades on them. So if you put the movie on, you walk out of the room, we're sitting there watching a screen that you can't see the movie on because the rooms aren't dark enough.
Right.
And the chairs too, even for elderly people, we need chairs, arms on chairs, you know? You're sitting there on a little tin chair. I think things like that need to be thought about. And some of them are inexpensive. The movies are a great drawer, but they need to be looked at. You know, a committee to set the movies up, decide what's good, take a vote for the seniors, something.
Yeah. Yep. So having movies and a place to view films and that kind of thing would be interesting to you. Okay. Other things that would get people to come to a Center for Active Living.
One thing, sorry. The one thing that really gets me there, and I couldn't wait to retire so that I could do some things that I never had time to do, was take art classes. And I love going there for art every week. And now that we moved downstairs, it used to be upstairs in these tiny little rooms that were dark. And now that we're downstairs with the big windows that don't have shades on them, it's so much better for painting. And it's a delight. I mean, it's a wonderful room for that. And we have space to move away from everybody. We're not all, we each have our own table. The one drawback is there's no place to store anything. So we have to lug everything with us each time, which is a backbreaker for a lot of us. But just having access to classes, to do things that we didn't have time to do when we were working. I worked a lot longer than most of my friends did, and I was very happy when I did retire to be able to go to the senior center and take art lessons and meet other people that were interested in doing the same thing. I didn't know where I'd ever meet anybody that was retired.
Like art, yeah.
And I've made a lot of friends there, and it's great, for things like that.
Yeah.
Which you don't think about when you're working, because you have access to, you're just used to it.
Right, or you don't have the time to do those kind of things.
So
absolutely, I think all of the arts, having a home for them and a place for people to engage, yeah.
So I'm a little confused. 5 years ago, you were here and you started doing an assessment. And it was determined 5 years ago that given the population using the center was too many people were using it for the space and size and programs that was adequate. Correct? So they had outlived it, or?
There wasn't space and capacity to meet the needs of the community, both in size and type
Correct.
of variety of programs and things like that.
So now we've moved present to 5 years. Are we starting now from where you left off 5 years ago and moving forward? Or are you starting, we hit the reset button and we're going from the beginning again?
No, we're building on that. So we determined the Pleasant Street Center is not working in 2017. Now we're trying to talk about what would work. What do we want in the community as far as a place for seniors and others to gather and participate in these kinds of programs. So it's the next step.
Okay, do you have a proposed timeline of where we're going, what it's going to go, how this is going to be? That's what I was interested in, and seeing where some proposals were, some costs and things along that nature. All the other discussion is important. But to echo what some of the other concerns are here, as this population does have limited fundings on a personal basis, what the cost, these people in this room here could be outpriced of going exactly where they need to go.
Right. So I think as far as timeline, we don't have that. We don't have a timeline. What we do know, so we don't have a timeline for the process. What we do know is that the next step after this is to get into the feasibility study, which is really where architects are brought in, there are drawings, there are site selection, there's sort of the square footage discussion, the number of parking spots discussion, and those kinds of logistics. But the information that's being gathered in this effort is to inform that feasibility study so that are they thinking about a multi-generational community center? Are they thinking about a satellite version of an existing senior center? Are they thinking about an annex to an addition to the Pleasant Street Center. So trying to understand what do people want that feasibility study to look like, and sort of what are we actually, what feasibility of what is really the question there. So that would be the next step.
How would we bring architects in if we don't know whether the present location could be renovated, improved, or something in the immediate area? Could you have that?
Well, I think we've determined that the existing building is not gonna work. So whether that's location is possible or some location around it is possible, that's still in discussion.
So you're saying that the present center could not be gutted, renovated, expanded from its present spot?
I don't think so, but that's from the needs of the community, the size of the population and what it's trying to provide, no.
I just wasn't clear on that, so it's like, all right, that's helpful to know.
Sure.
Yes, you had asked what you would like there. I don't know if it's gonna be there, but I would certainly like to see something very similar to what we have as a Veterans Affairs Officer. I'd like to have a senior ombudsman. I'd like somebody on the town staff, a full-time position that actually could function for our seniors. And what capacity, I'm kind of talking off the top of my head, I don't know, but it's pretty endless, whether that's helping them figure out their Medicare, whether it's figuring out daycare, whether it's figuring out senior planning, but we have a veterans, officer. And I think we're gonna have more seniors than we have veterans. Maybe that's actually something the town should really consider in terms of a staff position.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they have a nurse, they have a social worker, they have the administrator at the elders, the elder services, the Shine counseling for Medicare. So they have a lot of those, the very things you're talking about. I think part of the issue, and maybe this is part of what you're pointing at, is that there's a little bit of a lack of knowledge that those things exist. And there's also, so I think that's a point well taken in terms of, I think that those different things do exist. The town already has those positions, but it's about how do we make them more visible and coordinated in a way that people understand. So I think that's an important point. And it actually brings me to a question that's a little bit rhetorical, but I thought a point of discussion. One of the things that is possible is that the Center for Active Living would house departments beyond elder services. So veterans, a public health nurse, and social workers and things like that. And so one of the thoughts is sort of, okay, well, who else might be, who would be relevant in terms of town departments and being co-housed in this new space? And recreation is another opportunity. So this idea that it doesn't have to be just a senior center where other people can come, but perhaps it can be a municipal building that has offices and programs for people of different needs. So that's just another point I wanted to make with this question. And again, wanting to engage you guys in a conversation about where. So we talked about the importance and the value of having something local, downtown, central to the center of town. But are there other thoughts about where a Center for Active Living could possibly go in Reading? Any ideas? Again, we're not making decisions on any of this evening, just wanting to hear what are people's thoughts about where a Center for Active Living might go.
I don't know where, but there should be parking.
Yeah.
The current senior center does not have parking.
Yep.
And that Walgreens might be a great building, I don't know, but there's no parking.
No parking there either.
Yeah.
There is a parking lot back.
Not much.
Not
Yeah.
sufficient though.
Right, but I think that's a point well taken. We heard all about this transportation and the traffic and the problems with getting places, and parking is certainly one of that. So wherever we end up, there needs to be adequate parking. Other thoughts about where a Center for Active Living could be?
I don't know what's available down in that market basket.
Market basket
It's
area.
a huge complex. It's not in the center of town, but it's.
Yeah, and I think, and you could tell me if I am mishearing, but I think a consensus has been that if it's out of the center of town, that's acceptable, but we need to really think about the transportation aspect of that. So if it's not in the center of town, we have to ensure that there's ability for people who don't drive to get there. So that's a must, it sounds like to me, as well as the parking.
Sorry, I hate to be a bugaboo about this, and it really, because I drive, it really doesn't matter, and currently I really don't make active use of the senior center. I hope to at some point, but regardless of where you live, if you don't drive, it's not gonna be convenient for some people. I mean, and I'm not against downtown, but, being downtown doesn't necessarily equate to convenient.
Well, just because the senior center is in the center of town doesn't mean that everybody can walk there.
Right.
I mean, most people can't walk there either.
Right, anywhere you end up, there's gonna be portions of the community that aren't gonna be able to physically walk there. And then transportation is an issue as well. Oh, sorry, yes.
So we're supposed to just be brainstorming.
That's right.
So it's okay to say something when I don't know the answer to this.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of sort of complexes where a multi-generational or a senior center was close enough for walking to a school or schools where some of what I've heard today could be facilitated. So at a lunchtime, there could be a program where people meet first at that multi-generational or senior center and then head over to a cafeteria and help out with the kids. Or do a storytelling in a school auditorium or vice versa, or kids could come over and serve lunch. Or there was a wonderful program in Winchester where seniors did security in schools, and it evolved into one of the people that I only know about this woman's story, but she was making American Girl doll clothes while she was sitting there admitting people to the school. And the kids got so interested, and then they wanted to do a fundraiser. And so she ended up doing an after-school program with those kids, making these doll clothes, and she taught kids how to sew. And then they raised money for something they cared about. And it was a wonderful program that evolved from that proximity.
Yeah.
But if there were proximity to the other locations in town.
Yeah.
So we're building, hopefully, doing something with the Killam School. If there was something to do on that space, or I'm gonna say it out loud, but I know it's,
We won't hold
the Birch Meadow space. If there were something that could be put in that's close, the Birch Meadow space is close to a middle school, a high school, and an elementary school. And maybe there's a space for other fields and stuff that need to be redone elsewhere. I'm just throwing it out as brainstorming.
I appreciate that, so
I'm
proximity.
gonna look out and, oh, Mike left, but I'm gonna look out in the parking lot too.
Everybody be nice to the parking lot.
Thank you.
No, I think that's the kind of, those are ideas. I think we're talking about ideas here. I wanna be cognizant, we have about 15 minutes left, so I want people to sort of think about if there are other key desires, wants, things you wanted to make sure you said. Number one, you can write them on your card, but you can also raise your hand. I'll give folks one more time to sort of speak. But before I do that, I also wanted to sort of lay out the next steps of this project and make sure that you're all aware of what else is going on related to the Recalc Committee and specifically UMass's involvement in that. So we did these two forums today, one this afternoon and then this one this evening. We also have plans to be back in May to do an additional forum. And so if you'd like to come back, you're welcome. I won't be sorry to see you again, but also make sure that your friends, neighbors, family know that there's another opportunity for them to participate in a similar conversation. As well, over the summertime, we are going to be convening smaller group discussions, so focus groups with residents of various age groups and demographics, really trying to dig a little deeper in terms of what are their needs and preferences related to this kind of space. And then in the fall, we are moving towards a community survey that will be conducted here in Reading. So continue to be, prepare yourselves to respond to that survey and make sure that you're talking it up with your friends and neighbors. That'll be another opportunity for you to tell us your thoughts and opinions. And the idea is that all of that information, qualitative and quantitative, will be triangulated and analyzed by our team at UMass, and a report will be prepared by the end of the year. And that report will not only be a description of the results of this work, but also put forth some recommendations to Recalc as far as how they can be moving forward with the feasibility study, which is the natural next step of this process. So I wanted to make sure you're all aware of that and keep your eyes and ears out for those kinds of publicity. And one last show of hands, if anyone has anything else they we're wanting to make sure that they said about the Center for Active Living, and if not, write it on your note card and leave it for us. Anything else? All right, well, I appreciate everybody's thoughtful input this evening and you being here. Take some pizza on your way out, for sure, and stay in touch. Glad to be here, thank you. I'm sorry. Zoom?
No.
Okay. I totally zoned out of the Zoom. I figured somebody would maybe be on it.
Yeah, it